On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, good news on Jalen Brunson's ankle. The offense dies without him against the Clippers, and PJ Tucker is a Knick. We talk about it all next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Gavin Schall, your Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast, a longtime credentialed media member, and of course, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. In case you didn't know, this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week. And be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. And we wanted to remind you, in case you didn't know, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. That's right. We're introducing the Locked On Knicks daily newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. All right, guys, on today's show, it's a loaded one. Some positivity on Jalen Brunson's ankle injury. I'm going to talk and go into depth a little bit on my reaction to it because I wasn't on Thursday night and what it means for the Knicks going forward. The offense dying against the Los Angeles Clippers and what PJ Tucker will bring to the Knicks locker room. So we start off with some good news on Jalen Brunson's ankle. The injury obviously looked terrific. I was cautiously optimistic only in the sense that we have seen so many times over these last 2.5 years, Jalen get hurt with something that looked like it would keep him out for a long time. Once even looked like it would keep him out for a full year. And then he seems to be an extremely quick healer. I don't know what they're injecting in those Villanova guys, but I would love some. Maybe it's the same stuff LeBron's getting. They either don't get hurt or they recover from injury extremely quickly. And then we actually got some good news on Jalen Brunson. Here's the tweet. If you're watching on YouTube, from Ian Begley, everything on Jalen Brunson's ankle so far has shown a diagnosis that is much better than was initially feared by New York Knicks people. X-rays on the All-Star came back negative, so there's no broken bone. Specific sprain grade is unknown, but there is a feeling that diagnosis is significantly better than initially feared last night. So what that would suggest to me is we are going to see Jalen Brunson in a Knicks uniform again this season. Of course, if it was a grade 3 sprained ankle, in all likelihood, he would not be back in time for the playoffs, and probably even if the Knicks got to the first round, it was not a situation where you would see him again this year. A grade 2, a little bit dicey. Grade 1, we should hopefully see him in about 3 weeks. I would expect, based on that reporting, that we are probably going to next see Jalen Brunson the last 2 or 3 games of the regular season, just kind of a tune-up for the playoffs. That would be my best guess. Again, that is mostly going off vibes and how Jalen has healed in the past. As far as my reaction to the actual injury, because again, I wasn't on Thursday, so I watched the game. It was not fun, but I didn't get to react to the injury. In retrospect, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback here, but also not, because I've talked all season about the Knicks injury luck and how it was due to turn at some point, particularly with the minutes they played and also just the sheer mileage put on guys. And there's been no more mileage placed, that's the right way to phrase it, on any single Knick beyond Jalen Brunson. And that was supposed to be a thing of the past. That is one of the elements of this year's team that I was most excited about. You bring in Mikal Bridges, someone maybe not super successfully, but someone who had been a number 1 option. You bring in Karl Anthony Towns, someone who was questionable in terms of his initiation and creation for others, but had been a high efficiency number 1 option in the past, right? You get OG Anunoby back healthy. You get Josh Hart back healthy. You have Deuce McBride another year better. There was supposed to be less on Jalen's shoulders this year. And I think partially due to us underestimating the impact of Julius Randle as someone who could create shots for other people and soak up possessions in a way that Karl Anthony Towns simply can't, as a guy who is a little bit more inclined to be a play finisher than Randle is, who's more of an initiator. Underestimated the impact of losing Julius Randle. underestimated the impact of losing Dante DiVincenzo to some extent, just in that he made, like, Jalen could take 25 shots in a game with Dante. He could take 25 shots in a game without Dante. Generally, those 25 shots are going to be harder without Dante because he sucked a guy 30 feet away from the basket and just created that much more space for Jalen Brunson. Of course, you get some of that effect with Karl-Anthony Towns spacing out to the arc. Less so now that teams are treating Josh Hart how they used to treat Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle to some extent. So that shifted a little bit. And I also think it is due to Tom Thibodeau's lack of creativity offensively, because I think another coach, let's just say Mark Daigneault was the Knicks coach, or Kenny Atkinson was the Knicks coach, or Taylor Jenkins was the Knicks coach, I think they would be finding ways to leverage the shooting and spacing they have to put less on Jalen's shoulders. I also think, I was going to save this part for later, I think they would have found a way to involve Mikal Bridges as an initiator, something I have been talking about all season, just begging for them to run the guy off a pin down, give him a dribble handoff. Tom Thibodeau has largely appeared uninterested in doing that, even when the other team's fifth best defender is on Mikal Bridges. For some hard data on this, I pull up a tweet from our buddy Prez over at the Strickland, one of the smartest people covering the Knicks. Highly recommend giving him a follow at @_Presidente. And if you're watching on YouTube, it is a picture of Mikal Bridges' play type distribution. The quote from Prez, which is brilliant because he's a very smart, very funny guy. He said, which IMO really illustrates how poorly we use him. We use him like he's Courtney Lee. I left efficiency out. Anyone want to guess his most efficient play type? On spot ups, that's 29% of his shots. 23% of his shots come in transition. 10% of his shots come off cuts. Just 10% of his shots come as a pick and roll ball handler. That is 27% for wings, 27 percentile for wings. 6% of his shots come off dribble handoffs, and 5% of his shots come off screens. Ideally, the pick and roll ball handler, the handoffs would be higher. If I'm remembering correctly, the most efficient play type he has is as a pick and roll ball handler, ironically enough, because he doesn't get a lot of opportunities. And we'll talk about how against the Clippers, Tom Thibodeau was kind of put at gunpoint and forced to lean into that a little bit more, and how that could be one of the few positive outcomes of the Jalen Brunson injury. But in terms of actual impact on this team, and I know Alex talked about it a little bit Friday, I do think if he is back by the last couple games of the regular season, obviously it is not a good thing. It is never a good thing when your best player gets hurt. It is incredibly frustrating to have your best player get hurt. Again, I think just because of the amount of usage in a league that is now allowing dramatically more physicality than it did even a year ago. We talked about it when it happened. Something shifted with the officials. It seemed like that was presumably a direct mandate from Adam Silver to allow more physicality, to give defenses a little bit more of a chance against opposing offenses. I think there are different ways they could have gone about that outside of just not calling some obvious fouls. And maybe not allowing offensive guys to push off as much, but that's a conversation for another day. The point is, in a league that is more efficient, if you have a guy in Jalen Brunson who at 6'1", maybe 6'0", and he is leading the league in time on the basketball. I believe the stat was 8 minutes a game on the ball from Chris Herring, who does a great job over at ESPN. You are begging for trouble at a certain point, right? Like and I thought the Lakers game was the perfect encapsulation of it. Very little offensive creativity down the stretch. So it became the Jalen save us offense. And Jalen was doing it, right? Incredible shot making over and over again, going up against Luka Doncic, going up against LeBron James, tackling a defense that's been the best in the NBA over the last 20 or 25 games. And he was cooking them, but forcing the issue in transition, trying to go at LeBron, trying to go at Reeves, falls on Reeves' foot, badly turns his ankle. You know the story. Again, like some of that was inevitable, and maybe some of you would consider this a stretch, and some of you would consider me a Tibbs hater for pointing this out. I would argue that insane workload plus the increased physicality equals an injury for Jalen. And look, Jalen's not soft, right? He's not, I was going to say Steve Nash. I don't know why Steve Nash was tough as nails, even though he was thinly built. My point is, like, he's not even early career Steph Curry, right? He is built like a tank. He can take punishment, but he is also not prime LeBron James. He cannot take constant punishment and continue to get back up over and over again in perpetuity. Eventually, he's going to land wrong. He's going to turn an ankle. We've seen it happen a bunch of times, and generally turns his ankle, does the Mikal Bridges Terminator thing, snaps it right back into place, and he's okay. but inevitably he was going to get hurt at some point. And that has created not just the loss of Jalen Brunson, but a downwind effect that is really hurting this basketball team. We're going to talk about that and how their offense died against Los Angeles Clippers next here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I wanted to tell you about our friends over at Prizepicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get on the action than with Prizepicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prizepicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2-player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So there's a couple different ways you can go about this. You can build a whole lineup. This week, for example, I could be selecting Luka Doncic for more than 25 points and Jason Tatum for more than 8 rebounds. You can also do it the quick and easy way. Prizepicks makes it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. They also offer fast payouts. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. They also have Taco Tuesday deals every Tuesday. Prizepicks discounts player projections up to 25%, giving even more value to your lineup. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. So the New York Knicks put up a valiant fight against the Los Angeles Clippers, falling without the captain 105-95 in a game where the Clippers just shot lights out from 3. They finished 15 for 38. They were much better than that in the first half. Nick Batum made his first 5. Harden was cooking, looking like prime Harden, hitting step backs over OG Anunoby. So you could make a case, as I've seen some on Twitter have, that this was the best possible effort you could have expected from the Knicks without Jalen Brunson. I personally saw some areas that I think there could be improvement, while also seeing some positives. The first thing to me, and this is for me, and this is going to come off as a big bit of hypocrisy, is the guy who has been crying and screaming about Deuce McBride not starting. But he's not a point guard, right? And the offensive initiation is the single biggest thing you miss without Jalen Brunson. And Deuce McBride, I thought we learned this last season, but apparently not, is very clearly not the answer to that. The direction I would go, because Deuce is an incredible weapon off the ball. He opens up more space for you. He's really the only true movement shooter on this roster outside of Jalen Brunson, who can shoot off the dribble, can shoot off the catch on the run, etc. Give you a moderate facsimile of what Dante DiVincenzo gave you last year, without the range, without quite the accuracy, without the consistent ability off the dribble, but he gives you some of that stuff, right? So it's important to start Deuce McBride, but he is not an initiator. This was a problem all last year. If you listen to the podcast last year, I was constantly talking about the second half of the year when he was getting substantial minutes as a point guard. When he initiates offense, the Knicks very commonly do not actually begin running he does not give up the ball without creating any kind of advantage until 15 seconds left on the shot clock. There was a possession in the fourth quarter where he just got into a dribble handoff with 11 seconds left on the shot clock on a team that, again, does not have throw a live grenade to Jalen Brunson and watch him create magic against 4 defenders option anymore. You can't hit that emergency button. That is death. That is death, particularly against the defense as good as the Los Angeles Clippers defense. It is a major issue. He does not really know the reads he needs to make at the point guard spot. That's not to say he's a terrible passer or anything, but I think a good example occurred in the first quarter. The Knicks ran a Spain pick and roll where essentially you set an on-ball screen, and then you have a third player come in and screen for the screener, right? And that third player can pop, the screener can roll, or vice versa. And the Knicks run it perfectly. You have Cat rolling to the rim to stay on the ball. So he's open. Nick Batum is forced to rotate over. Presumably, if that's a lob over the top from Deuce, Cat catches high, Cat dunks it on Nick Batum, right? You don't want to make that pass because Batum rotated over. Mikal Bridges was wide open in the right corner. You could spray it over there. Deuce, I don't think, sees that he's open because Deuce is very short and, again, not a great passer and hasn't had hundreds of on-ball reps to correct that like someone like Jalen Brunson has in the NBA to become a good, if not great, passer. So Deuce clanks an elbow jumper. So that is issue number one that I'm seeing. The initiation, how can you supplement that with more Mikal Bridges? And this is the one upside of Jalen Brunson getting hurt, is that he is such a brilliant offensive player that it gives Tom Thibodeau essentially a mulligan for not running creative, organized offense in any substantial capacity. Because Jalen is an engine that with spacing can give you a historically good offense. I don't even know if we appreciate how special Jalen Brunson is, because he is essentially doing all this with one hand tied behind his back. Is it a little easier than it was, let's say, his first year, right? Where you had RJ and Randall and Mitch out there all the time? Hell yeah, it's a little bit easier than it is then, right? Because Leon Rose has built a more complementary offensive roster around his skill set, but Tom Thibodeau has utterly failed in maximizing that roster around him. And this injury forces you to get more creative, because if not, you're going to go from one of the top 5 offenses in NBA history, which the Knicks were for a long stretch this year, to one that can't crack 100 points, even against an average defense, right? Forget an elite defense like the Clippers. And I do think part of that is more plays for Mikal Bridges. And it doesn't have to be as intricate as what Steve Kerr is running in terms of like everything that the Golden State Warriors do off the ball. He doesn't even have to totally perfect the spacing principles that a coach like Kenny Atkinson has in Cleveland, where he's found ways to force a defense to guard non-shooters. You can do really simple things like, I don't know, give Mikal Bridges a dribble handoff, right? Which the Knicks did a couple of times. There was one where he had a DHO, Kawhi nearly stole it. He picked it up off the ground, crossed him up, hit a long jumper, right? That's on one of the greatest defenders of all time. Had another one where he ran around Precious Achiuwa. They faked the dribble handoff. He kept cutting, and Precious hit him for a bounce pass for a layup. Precious, we'll get to it in a sec. He had a brilliant passing game in this one. There was another play that I would consider a missed opportunity that I saw. I think shout out to Prez again. I think he was pointing this out on the thread that Shaq's tweeted out. Seriously, guys, bunch of smart people on Knicks Twitter you should be following if you want to be smarter basketball fans, because they help me with all this stuff. But anyways, there's a play where Josh Hart screens for him, right? And he gets to a fairly open mid-range jumper. But if Hart sets a Gortat screen, which is essentially where you screen the initial defender, and then in your roll, you stop and you screen the defender in drop. It is a layup because it is a wide open lane. Zubac was in drop. Hart was in position to do it, and he just doesn't do it. And Mikal Bridges could have snaked it, gotten back, gotten a layup. Instead, settles for a mid-range jumper, misses it. That's a little bit on Josh Hart. It's more so on Tom Thibodeau for not driving home that's a possibility. Hopefully, on the rewatch, he notices that and says, hey, next time, do this. But you see a lot of missed opportunities for Hart. Screening at times where he just sort of floats out on the perimeter. And again, defenses, I think, learning from what the Celtics have done to him, learning from what the Thunder have done to him, are just aggressively, more so than ever, treating him like a non-shooter. And if that's going to happen and he's still going to have positive value, one, he has to take threes when he's open. That's the most important thing. Two, he has to be a really talented screener. He has to be really effective as an outlet if they end up trapping Mikal Bridges on a play like that. A lot of stuff has to happen, because right now I don't think he's been helping this team these last few games. But there was more good in this game from Mikal. Like, drew a couple shooting fouls. That's obviously a sight for sore eyes. Had another nice one where he got it from Campaign on the move, and then Precious ran in, set a quick screen for him. And it's not anything complicated, right? Just decisively 2 dribble, elbow extended, pull up jumper. Those plays are huge. As far as other notes for this one, I'll just finish up on Hart just to get that point fully across. 20 rebounds in this game, a career high. That's great. Again, on a night where the Clippers don't treat him like a non-shooter. It is really, really hard. He can do a million little Josh Hart things. And he did at points in this game, right? In the first quarter, had a long stretch where he created a bunch of buckets, like set Cat up for a jam, set Deuce up for a transition 3, then drove to the rim and hit OG for a smooth wing 3. They need Josh Hart, particularly on the ball, because when he's on the ball, you can't treat him. You obviously generally have to guard him if he's going downhill on the ball. But they need him on the ball. They need him as a screener. Essentially, they just need him involved in the action, period, because every time he passes up a wide open 3, that's a possession killer. Every time he's sitting out on the arc and his guy's not guarding him, that is a possession killer. And where that translated to was Karl Anthony Towns not having a particularly efficient night, as Cat shot just 8 for 21, 23 points and 10 boards. And Cat had some really good moments in this game. And he had a bunch of shots that went in and out, right? On a different night, he might have still been pretty efficient, but you saw these plays where Cat literally had to go through 4 guys because no one's really guarding Josh Hart. And the Clippers, again, this has been a trend with good teams. They just largely disrespect the Knicks shooters, but even more so, they disrespect Cat's passing out of drives, and they acknowledge that he's not going to pass that drives. Like one of the first plays of this game, he attacked the rim and got stripped because 2 guys were on him, and it was done really helping off Mikal in one corner, and then Zubac was a third guy waiting for him at the rim, even if he hadn't gotten stripped, and helping off the other corner. Had some nice runs of buckets, particularly in the third. Like he got a 3 off just a really simple dribble handoff from Josh Hart. It would be nice to see the Knicks continue to lean into that, run more of that. But it's not going to be efficient again unless you're using Josh Hart the right way, because if not, you can just load up on Cat, and Cat is not a good enough passer to leverage that, even if Josh Hart was willing to shoot a wide open catch and shoot 3. But inefficient night for Cat at 8 for 21. Inefficient night for OG Anunoby. He went just 4 for 15. Deuce McBride, 2 for 13. Cam Payne, 2 for 7. And look, I don't want to let those guys off the hook, right? It's partially the Clippers defense. Partially, like, Deuce just didn't make shots, and Deuce has struggled all year to get a lot going at the rim. Like you see these random flashes where he'll cross someone up and get a dunk. But by and large, like the progress we saw Deuce make on the ball towards the end of last season, where he was cooking people at points, I have not seen that as consistently this year. And again, it's a testament to his shooting and his reputation as a shooter and his one-on-one defense and screen navigation that he is still such an incredible positive. And I will stay here and I will keep banging the table for him to start these games, even when he's not shooting the ball well. But he's had a tough shot making season. OG, I think at a certain point, like he is overtaxed if you're asking him to do too much on the ball. Had a few nice plays, like had that and one at the end of the third quarter on Amir Coffey on like a rip through into a floater. Catch rip double pump play on, I think it was Zubac in the first quarter. Like when he attacks early and he gets downhill, good things happen, but it was a tough day overall. The defense, even though they only gave up 105 points, I don't think it was I thought Deuce was good on defense. I thought it was mostly not a strong effort. The Knicks had a lot of issues, as is common for them, getting matched up in transition, gave up a bunch of threes that way. And I noticed a lot of times where they were overhelping. I know that is a complaint from many of you looking at the comments on our videos. I've talked about it at times. That is Tom Thibodeau's scheme, right? Cut off the paint, concede the 3. The Knicks have been a poor 3-point defense this entire year. The Clippers got a bunch of looks because they either overhelped, like OG at one point went over and doubled James Harden when Deuce was right up on him, and you get Nick Batum, who's red hot with a wide open 3. OG thinks in that situation, like, hey, Deuce is a good defender, but he's small. Harden's going to get a step back on him. And you know what I'd say? I'd say that is a better shot for the Knicks than a wide open 3 for Batum, when Batum is like 4 for 4 from 3 at that point. Maybe Tom Thibodeau agrees with that. Cat was really bad. He fell asleep on literally the first play of the game and gave up a dunk to Zubac. He didn't run back on another play, conceded a second dunk in 2 plays to Zubac. Another play later in the first or maybe early in the second where Zubac beat him down the floor, and Cat was late getting back and then just sat there in no man's land, and he got a layup. So that was all bad. Before we wrap up our game recap portion of this, and we'll talk PJ Tucker, very quick shout out to Precious Achiuwa, who played one of his better games of the season and was probably him playing above his head was the reason the Knicks were in it. Like his creation's been really good the last few weeks. Like he had a drive on Drew Eubanks and got a layup off of that. Another play where he had perfect drop D on Bogdan, R.I.P. Bojan. Perfect drop on Bogdan. And then baited the pass to Eubanks, rotated over and blocked him, hit a short fader over Zubac. And then I mentioned the pass to Bridges, hit Shamet on a beautiful backdoor Isaiah Hartenstein style bounce pass, had an and one push shot, held up in the post against Zubac. Honestly, better than Karl Anthony Towns did, weirdly enough. Great backup center minutes on a night that Mitchell Robinson got off. So those are all my thoughts on Knicks Clippers. We will wrap up with some very quick comments on PJ Tucker's and Nick, what he will potentially bring to this team. Why I'm pretty optimistic about it. We'll get into that next here on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at OpenPhone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone. And before you know it, you're juggling customer calls, all day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with your personal number. That's where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal lives separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you can get complete transparency and visibility to everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer, integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. We also want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. For example, I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. I was banging the Knicks money line against the Lakers. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. PJ Tucker is a New York Knick. What a world. I didn't think we'd live to see it. I have a long, fun history with PJ. I was in college at Arizona State, downtown Phoenix campus. Shout out when PJ was with the Suns. We overlapped for 4 years. I remember the trade deadline where he ultimately got dealt. Devin Booker was doing like an exit interview at the end of the trade deadline and was saying, man, I told PJ he wouldn't get traded. I knew we were going to keep him. And then it came out like 5 minutes later that PJ Tucker was in fact traded right at the deadline to the Toronto Raptors before ending up for the run that defined his career as the enforcer and the top defender on those Houston Rockets teams that probably win a championship in a world where Chris Paul doesn't get hurt or they don't miss 26 3-pointers in a row, or the Golden State Warriors don't assemble the greatest team in modern NBA history. So what does PJ Tucker bring to the New York Knicks? First, to address the people who were big Chuma Okeke fans or Moses Brown fans or TJ Warren fans, I was really excited about them signing TJ, another guy who's on the Suns teams who has a special place in my heart. But here's the thing at the end of the day. The 15th man buyout guys, it is extraordinarily rare for them to make any substantial impact in a playoff series, right? It just does not really happen. And if you acknowledge that the possibility for an on-court impact is incredibly unlikely, who do you bring into the locker room? You bring in someone, you should bring in someone to have an impact on the intangible part of the game. And that is PJ Tucker to a T. I don't think he's someone, barring an emergency situation, who should be on an NBA court at how old is he? At 30, I'm going to say he's 39 years old. I actually don't have it up in front of me. But the last time we saw him playing 28 games for the Clippers last year, he was putting up 2 points per game in 15 minutes. That is a low number, 15 minutes, shooting 36% from the field, just under 37% from three, not shooting any free throws, getting a couple rebounds. Like he is Udonis Haslem at 43 years old levels of washed as an actual player. But I think he can potentially have an incredible effect on this team that has seemingly had some locker room issues this year, right? We had all the comments from Josh Hart alluding to some selfishness earlier this year. I am not going to say who I think that was referencing, but I think people could make a pretty good guess of it. And I would guess that has been an ongoing problem to some extent, particularly as the team has struggled, and the team has really struggled against good teams. And the Knicks are in a weird place in that they have all these like pseudo vets and all these guys with experience and guys like Jalen Brunson who are extremely mature and extremely professional, but they don't really have anyone outside of campaign who is 30 years old, right? They don't have anyone older than that on this team. And PJ Tucker will bring like an FU to this locker room, right? And a voice that you have to listen to every time he talks because of his experience, because of his toughness, because he is just a MFer is the word I'm allowed to use on this podcast. He's a major MFer, right? And he's not going to tolerate like Mikal Bridges deciding not to shoot for a whole half against the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's not going to tolerate Josh Hart getting back cut to oblivion. He's not going to tolerate OG Anunoby taking off 5 games in a row defensively relative to his talents, right? I think he can light a fire under this team. I think he can restore some level of competitive spirit. That was a big conversation when you lose DiVincenzo, when you lose Isaiah Hartenstein, two killers, right? Is that still here? And I think the Knicks have lost some of that because I don't think, at least the version we've gotten of him this year, I don't think Mikal Bridges is that guy. I think OG Anunoby is that guy when he wants to be, but it's not always that guy. I think Karl-Anthony Towns is that guy from an effort perspective. I don't know if he's always able to back it up with defensive execution on the court. And I think PJ Tucker will hold everyone accountable. Of course, that is first and foremost on Tom Thibodeau. But when you have the same coach for 5 years, you can start to tune him out a little bit. And I'm not saying that's what's happening, but you do see small signs of that. Like I particularly think of the transition defense, which has been just inexplicably not fixed. And that is very strange to me on a Tom Thibodeau coach team that this group is not getting the details right defensively. If I was going to guess, fatigue is a factor to some extent. The fact that this team doesn't really practice is a factor to some extent. But I also do think there's a need for a voice other than Tom that can get through to these guys. And maybe that is Rick Brunson to some extent, but I have a feeling hearing it from a player who, unlike a coach, is not limited in his ability to just rip a star, even if it's Jalen Brunson who's messing up a new one. I think there is some value in having someone like PJ Tucker who feels very, very comfortable doing that. And for now, it's only a 10-day. Who knows if it ends up being the rest of the season? I have a feeling it will end up being the rest of the season. And I think it's a good addition for those reasons. But that is it for today's episode of Locked On Knicks. Again, please subscribe. Please give us a 5-star review to help grow the show. Comment your thoughts on the Knicks adding PJ Tucker. What do you think he brings to the table? Get well soon, Jalen Brunson. And we'll talk to you very soon on Locked On Knicks.